So today we're in Genesis 43, continuing on with the narrative of Joseph meeting his brothers in Egypt, or rather of his brothers meeting him. Okay.
Genesis
43. I'll give you a minute here to catch up. Alright, starting in verse 1, which is a good place to start. Now the famine was severe in the land, and it came to pass, when they had eaten up the grain which they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them, Go back and buy us a little food. But Judah spoke to him, saying, The man solemnly warned us, saying, You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy food, but if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, You shall not see my face again unless your brother is with you. So obviously they haven't eaten all of the food because, well, if you eat all the food, they're going to come back to everyone being dead. So just wanted to make a short comment on that. You know, they've eaten the food to the point where they know that reserves are low enough again to kind of cause a sense of urgency. And now also take in mind that you're going to be sending, well, 9, because Simeon's still in prison in Egypt, so he's been there this whole time. But you're also going to have 9 less mouths to feed, so it really could have been one of those things where if they were there, they wouldn't have had much food, but now you're getting 9 less mouths to feed. Great. It's a large encampment, granted. 70 end up going. But the amount of food gets low enough once again to actually warrant another trip to buy it. Of course, you can't. Joseph's already requested Benjamin has to be there in order for them to get food. So verse 3, verse 6, and Israel said, Why do you deal so wrongly with me as to tell the man whether you still had another brother? But they said, The man asked us pointedly about ourselves, about our family, saying, Is your father still alive? Have you another brother? And we told him according to these words. Could we have possibly known that he would have said, Bring your brother down? So, according to the last chapter, chapter 42, this seemed like it was all voluntary information. Here we're getting extra additional information that, hey, he asked this. And then in chapter 44, we do find out, that yes, Joseph was actively inquiring about all of this. Yeah, exactly. Then Judah said to Israel, his father, Send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and and you, and also our little ones. I myself will be surety from him. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, let me bear the blame forever. For if we had not lingered, surely now we would have returned this second time. So here you have Judah kind of stepping up. Before it was Reuben, and he's like, hey, if anything befalls anyone, it's okay. You can kill my sons, But here we have Judah coming up, and there's a major difference between these two instances. One, Reuben, of course, being the firstborn, I think he's just trying to prove something. He's trying to give comfort and everything. We pointed out, how would that cause comfort? That would just cause more grief. Judah has experienced the loss of 2 sons. So he's coming from a bit more of a ground of understanding. It's also kind of interesting that from this point on, we don't really hear much from Reuben. At this point, Judah really does kind of take charge of things. Reuben was the eldest. Yeah, Reuben was the eldest. Simeon, if I'm remembering correctly, Simeon was the next eldest. When they were imprisoned in the last chapter, Reuben had, Joseph found out that Reuben had stuck up for him, and then he ended up imprisoning the next, I almost said the next firstborn, but the next oldest. My brain with this cold, man, is it's funny the things you think of or don't think of. Anyway. Yeah. But so he points out, you know, if we hadn't already lingered, we would have already been back the second time. It's like, you know, Simeon would be here with us now, kind of thing. So verse 11, and their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then do this. Take some of the best fruits of the land in your vessels and carry down a present for the man. A little balm, a little honey, spices and myrrh, pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double money in your hand, and take back in your hand the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take your brother also, and arise, go back to the man, and may God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may be released to your brother, that he may release your brother and Benjamin. If I am bereaved, I am bereaved. And so what's kind of funny there is, again, you have the emphasis on Benjamin. Yeah, you have the emphasis there on Benjamin. It's like, maybe he'll release your other brother and Benjamin. But he's reached the point where, you know what, that this has to be done. And I don't know really if it's one of those recognition of God being sovereign, where God is sovereign, may he have mercy. If I'm bereaved, kind of like Job, where Job is, you know, praise the God who gives and takes away. Or if this is just one of those reaching sort of a finality of either Benjamin dies or we all die in his mind. You know, it's either you risk Benjamin or you're risking everyone. So verse 15, the men that took the present and Benjamin, and they took double the money in their hands and arose and went down to Egypt, and they stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of the house, take these men to my home and slaughter an animal, and make ready for these men to dine with me at noon. Then the man did as Joseph ordered, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. Now the men were afraid. Because they were brought into Joseph's house, and they said, it is because of our money, which was returned in our sacks the first time, that we are brought in, so that he may seize us and may make a case against us and seize us, to take us as slaves with our donkeys. When they drew near to the steward of Joseph's house, they talked with him at the door of the house and said, oh, sir, we indeed came down the first time to buy food, but it happened when we came to the encampment that we opened our sacks, and there each man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight. So we have brought it back in our hand, and we have brought down other money in our hand to buy food. We do not know who put the money in our sacks. But he said, peace be with you, do not be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money. Then he brought Simeon out to them. Now, I meant to actually stop a little bit further back, but there's this interesting little parallel going on. It usually refers to this group as the brothers, the 10 brothers, or the 9 brothers, or the sons of Jacob, or something like this in the narrative. But here it stopped referring to them by name. It's starting to bring the two groups together. They're now the men and that man, the men and that man, instead of just saying, the sons of Jacob versus Joseph, or that man who rules the land of Egypt. They've kind of shorthanded it, and they're not, and so it's starting to narratively kind of bring these guys together in a very poetic way. The terminology is making them closer and more related through the terms. Yes, Stuart.
They didn't know where the money came from. There was a woman in New Orleans, and we were at church, and she was telling the story. She had $4.98. That's the exact amount that she needed to go to McDonald's to get her hamburger and her meal. She was walking down the road, and this guy says, "Do you have $1, please?" She kept walking. She came back, and she decided to give him the $1. When she got to McDonald's, she had $4.98 in her pocket. So
I've actually had things like that happen to me before. But
asks for something and they want more. Generally, they're not telling you the truth about what they want.
That's what I was
All right.
afraid of. I thought, well, she can agree, but then, sometimes like,
Who are we to judge?
yeah, we don't know, but you should, said you're supposed to like the people without expecting them to die.
okay, so moving on. So here, it's also noticed that Joseph's servant here has obviously been taught about Yahweh. He had a response. He's like, no, the God of your father, or your God, the God of your fathers, He provided this for you. And so it also shows that he was in on the scheme, at least, of returning this money. Verse 24. So the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their donkeys feed, and they made I skipped something. It was fairly common knowledge that high-ranking Egyptian officials may have personal dungeons, which is why they're so afraid of being brought to his house.
Oh.
For example, we see, which actually kind of answered a little bit of the question about, well, was he still serving Potiphar? And the question is possibly, because it does keep mentioning, the house, the dungeon, the house. So it may have just simply been that he was imprisoned in Potiphar's house instead of given free rein. We don't know. I can't tell you for certain, but it's an interesting possibility.
But here he's serving Pharaoh.
Yeah, now he's talking to Joseph. But this is one of the reasons why they're apprehensive about being brought to his house, and they're like, he's going to make a case against us and make us slaves. Well, high-ranking officials having, small dungeons, small prisons inside their houses certainly gives credibility to that. Or it gives credibility to the fear. Not, that it actually happened. It didn't. Anyway. So he washed their feet and gave their donkeys feed, verse 25. Then they made the present ready for Joseph's coming at noon, for they heard that they would eat bread there. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, and bowed down before him to the earth. Then he asked about their well-being and said, "Is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke? Is he still alive?" And they answered, "Your servant our father is in good health. He is still alive." And they bowed their heads down and prostrated themselves. Then he lifted his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, "Is this your younger brother of whom you spoke to me?" And he said, "God be gracious to you, my son." Now his heart yearned for his brother, so Joseph made haste and sought somewhere to weep. And he went into his chamber and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out, and he restrained himself and said, "Serve the bread." So they set him a place by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked in astonishment at one another. Then he took servings to them from before him, but then he took servings to them, from before him, but Benjamin's serving was 5 times as much as any of theirs. So they drank and were merry with him.
Well, I think that Jeremiah was telling the story. He mentioned how it was beginning to dawn on them that this person, Joseph, even though they didn't know who he was, knew more about them. Like, when they were astonished, was how come he knows our ages and he set us in the right place?
Yeah, that was actually my next point that I was going to bring up. You know, it is a point of realization that, you know, how can this guy set us directly in our birth order?
Right.
You know,
How did he know this?
and so I also wanted to address the eating setup. He's sitting by himself because position of authority. It basically boils down to that. He's sitting by himself because of a position of authority. The Hebrews and the Egyptians, we're not really sure whether it's something that's outright forbidden by their religious practice, kind of like how the many of the Jewish people in the first century had this idea that Gentiles were unclean and wouldn't go into their house or eat with them, even though it's not part of their law, or even though it's not part of the Torah, it was part of their law. And so I don't know if it's something like they had a similar practice in Egypt, but we do know that they looked down on like shepherders and things like that. And not only that, but just their manner in general. Egyptians were known for basically being entirely clean shaven, you know, no hair, everything like this. And the Semitic people, here you see this like bunch of scruffy people in, longer hair, scraggly beards, just hair everywhere. And so they're just like, I'm not sitting at a table with that. You know, it's, and so it's half this just cultural, you know, looking down on, and then there's also the status of rank. They viewed the shepherders and everything as so much beneath them. I mean, they're breadbasket of the world. Other people herd, and they'll bring meat to us, you know? Yes.
I was in Norway in 1968 coming from the port of Oslo towards a place where we were going to be staying. And while we were driving through the countryside going over there, we encountered a whole big giant herd of sheep. Well, if you take your two fingers and hold your nose, that helps a little bit. It smells real bad. Or shall I say bad?
All right. So just to finish up, just to finish up then, of course, not only did he sit them in order, but he ended up taking 5 times as, oh, by the way, they're being fed. It's kind of important to note, they didn't just have the servants bring food out to them. They had the servants bring food to Joseph's table, and then from Joseph's table to them.
Wow, that was special.
You know, and so that's kind of a significant thing in itself, you know, getting food directly from the authorities' table. And of course, Benjamin gets 5 times as much. And it's a bit of a test, though. It's a bit of a test because at the time, they despised him. He wants to see if, you know, visibly, how are they going to react if I openly show favoritism? And he knows Benjamin is the only other son of Rachel. Thank you. The one
Blood brother to Joseph.
yeah, full-blooded brother, but also Jacob's favored wife is how I was trying to phrase that. Right. You know, he's the only other son of Jacob's favored wife, meaning he knows that Jacob's probably already favoring Benjamin, and so here comes this official who's going to give him 5 times more. How are they going to react to this? And they don't really have much of a reaction. They were all happy. They ate, drank, and were merry with him. You know, he didn't dispute. So, you know, it really does. It shows. This is a great passage for showing a lot of growth in the biblical patriarchs, or the tribal patriarchs, I should say.
Who was there? Mary.
Oh.
Come on now. Let's keep on focused.
Yeah. But and so it's kind of interesting, that I just found it interesting that the proverb today brought up the whole, blessed are those who don't withhold the grain and everything. And it's like we're discussing the famine of Egypt and how he's selling the grain. Not only did he sell the grain, but he gave them their money back. It's like he's just outright giving it to them. He's not selling it. There's just all this stuff. And we, discussed earlier about growth. And this is a really good passage to show growth. It's funny, I always sometimes get into these things where there's like two scenes in the narrative and like there's nothing here. And then I really start reading it and reading it and reading it and reading it, and then I start reading commentaries and goes, there's so much more here. But I hope I brought something to your attention that you hadn't seen before. We'll close that. And we'll open.
To read ahead, you can do this at home.
There's this guy I've been listening to, because we are reliant on translators unless you just know your thing. And so many people these days are questioning the translations without being trained in the language, or they're questioning whether books should be in the Bible at all and everything like that. And the guy responded with a tongue-in-cheek kind of, y'all be quiet and read your Bible as interpreted by experts. And because he's also one of those people, now he's studied the languages, and so when he disputes a translation, he's actually disputing the grammatical structure and things like that. So he's not saying like don't read it unquestioningly, but if you're gonna nitpick at stuff, make sure you're actually knowing what you're talking about. I thought it was funny. I also like but while I'm finding my page in the Siddur, we're going to page 16. We've talked before about sanctification, how it's God that causes growth in us and everything. This guy also has an analogy that sanctification is falling up an escalator. You're not the one causing your upward movement. You're the one just continually falling backward as you get dragged up. But I loved that analogy. He's like, sanctification is falling up an escalator. All right. Anyway, so let's stand for the Torah closing. And again, we'll just do the English. And this is the Torah that Moses placed before the children of Israel at the command of Yahweh through Moshe's hands. All right. If you guys want to sing it, have fun. Just. Those who take hold of it and those who support it are praiseworthy. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Bring us back, Yahweh, to you, and we shall come. Renew our days as of old. Brittany or someone, will you help? Or, oh, yeah, Michael, you're right here. There we go. All right. My brain just... Baruch atah Yahweh, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lachem min haaretz. Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh our Elohim, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. Thank you, love. Go, Heather. Baruch atah, Baruch atah Yahweh, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Blessed are you, Yahweh our Elohim, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine. Amen. Thank you.
Now we circle up in a minute.
It's coming around.
I'm on your right. And I'm on your left, maybe?
We'll make it around.
We may have to reach across the table.
Yeah, sure.
Do you want wine?
Juice, please.
There's no juice.
Oh, can I have water? Just forget it if you want to. I don't want
Yeah, it's fruit. Fruit of the vine.
Yeah, we're coming around. I think everybody's here now. There you go.
There you go.
Oh, great. Fruit of the vine.
All right.
Vine.
You might need to join their hands together first.
Yeah, my hair.
Okay. Yivareka Yahweh v'yishmereka. Ya'er Yahweh panavaleka v'yehuneka. Yisa Yahweh panavaleka v'yasem lecha shalom. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up his countenance upon you and grant you shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 shalom. Shabbat, 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 shalom. Shabbat, shalom. Shabbat, shalom. Shabbat, 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 shalom.
Amen. All right, and Heather, is the food ready yet, or still need a couple minutes to set up? Okay, so we need to get the food set up. Give us just a few minutes and.
Hey Mike, would you be able to help me with the others? Once we finish getting our stuff set up, then we'll come help you.